any wargame, anytime.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. We are going to turn fanboy here, and we are going to talk about why GW is just so awesome of a company. And more specifically, I think we're going to talk about the lore of GW. We've expressed some feelings about GW in the past, but I think that it's good as a balanced perspective to sort of talk about the things that we like about them. And, I think each of us, all of us, I think a great place to start is just the lore. But before we go into that, I've got Bozz and I've got Sam here. Always glad to have them on. Bozz, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I've been informed that I've got some technical difficulties with my audio cutting in and out, but we'll see how we go. I'm looking forward to talking about GW's lore because, I think it's their absolute saving grace, not as a company, but just not from a company point of view, but just from a creative point of view. The people that they've got writing for them, especially their past writers, I think are just top notch, and I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, great to have you, Bozz, and Sam, as always.
Yeah, also looking forward to this. I unfortunately missed the YGW sucks episode, so I didn't get to throw my 2 cents into there. So, there's a slight chance that some of my responses may be influenced by my longing to have been there. But all the same, GW's it really is the highlight of them as a company is their lore, and it's the thing that's kind of, for me, kept me going back for years. And I still have all my old codexes that I like to pull out sometimes and look at some of the stories in there because they were just the art was just fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's get started. So I'll start with myself, and I play I guess OPR is High Fleets, but it's Eldar, and I'm going to read some lore from the second edition Eldar book. This came out in 1994. This is almost 30 years old. And I'm not going to read all of the lore because I think, get the book, basically. But I want to read a few things. More specifically, I want to read about the Aspect Warriors and about Exarchs, because to this day, it's why I love playing Aspect Warrior heavy Eldar, because this lore on the Aspect Warriors and the Exarchs was really just so good. But before that, I want to read a little paragraph on starting out to kind of show you the quality of writing. So this is the first paragraph in the Eldar book. Lost in the vastness of space, the craft worlds float in utter isolation like scattered jewels upon a pail of velvet. No starshine illuminates their sleek towers. Distant from the warmth of the sun or planets, their domes stare into the darkness of the empty space. Inner lights glisten like phosphorus through a semi-transparent surfaces. Within live the few survivors of planets abandoned eons ago amidst terrifying destruction. These are the Eldar, a race that is all but extinct, the last remnants of a people whose mere dreams once overturned worlds and quenched suns. Just what a great way to just start out the codex, just that piece.
It's so rich again, and descriptive.
Yeah, it's just like, wow. And I remember reading this as a teenager, and I was just hooked. That was it for me. So I won't read everything because they get into the Infinity Circuit, they get into Slaanesh, the Exodites, the Avatars. There's so much to get in here. But one of the things that I think when I've heard other people comment on the Eldar, I think they tend to miss them because the Eldar, honestly, in the 40K universe are a really screwed up race. They are really messed up. And I want to read, and we're going to get into what's called the Eldar Path. And let's just read this to sort of show you that the Eldar aren't sort of traditional elves, which are sort of haughty, but their lives are just awesome. They are actually a pretty messed up race. So let's read about the Eldar Path. That's what it's called. It says the Eldar are extremely long-lived by human standards, commonly surviving over thousands of years before old age overtakes them. They also live at a pace and pitch of intensity many times greater than that of even the most talented and determined humans. Eldar's heart beats almost twice as fast as a man's, and his mind processes thoughts and emotions with baffling speed. His physical reactions are almost too fast for the human eye to follow. It is the speed and the mental capacity which makes Eldar more different from humans than appearances might otherwise suggest. It is hard for a human to understand the incredible potential of the Eldar mind. To an Eldar, all life's experiences are available to a heightened degree. The intellectual rewards of study, the exhilaration of battle, the creative impulses of art and music, and every imaginable pleasure of sensation. No creature, not even an Eldar, can taste such fruits in an uncontrolled and undisciplined way. And that's a key thing. It says no creature can taste these things in an uncontrolled and undisciplined way. They have this incredible sense, but they also recognize that even they can't sort of deal with it. So for an Eldar to yield absolutely to his desires would destroy him. They have the ability to sate almost any intellectual whim, to satisfy any physical appetite. Such was the fate of the ancient Eldar, who succumbed to temptations of intellectual conceit and physical pleasure, whose depravities brought upon them the fall of the Eldar worlds themselves. So one of the things that is so cool that they get into about Eldar, these Eldar, they experience things at such a high level that even they, if they don't control it, they literally will just basically turn into psychopaths and just absolute crazy people. So what did they do? How did Eldar basically survive this sort of almost tormented existence? It says the survivors of the Eldar of the craft worlds have developed a way to control their inner natures. Every Eldar chooses for himself a discipline in which he then makes it to his task to master. It may take years to successfully accomplish this, perhaps a single human lifetime. Each discipline is rightly called a path. Each path may necessitate further choices and specializations. So they get into the things like the path of the warriors, in which we'll talk a little bit about. But that's how these Eldar basically control this sort of extreme experience that they have. They have to be extremely regimented to basically almost it's almost like they're recovering drug addicts, that they have to constantly be focused on something else, or else. So it's honestly, when you think about it, it's a pretty messed up existence to sort of have to always have that way. So I want to know, I'll continue on a bit, but first of all, Bozz and Sam, what do you think about that? Isn't it interesting?
So this is one of the hallmarks of kind of grim dark, whether it's fantasy or sci-fi. And one of the things I've always loved about grim dark, kind of fiction, is it's in a well-written kind of grimdark universe. It's not it's a lot of times it's the good things about a people that ultimately destroy them, right? They have this heightened sense, this heightened ability to have, to experience pleasure and intellectual stimulation, and it's that ultimately drives them to ruin. And that's kind of one of the hallmarks of a grimdark universe. And it's really just when it's well written, and GW has consistently done well written grimdark stuff, it's just so fascinating to watch. It's like an unfolding of a Greek tragedy. I mean, where a noble people, just fall to ruin because they can't, because in some ways they're too good, and they've got this, like, it's too much, and it just drives them into oblivion. It's a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah.
To read.
Yeah, this old Eldar stuff, it's almost peak grimdark.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of further what Sam's saying, like, it's really, really cool that they have all this heightened stuff, and that's ultimately what creates the Chaos God Slanesh.
That's right.
All I was trying to do was have a good time. I can have a real good time, so why wouldn't I try and have a real good time? Oops, I just created a Chaos God. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that this Eldar life is not like all this ability to experience this, they don't enjoy it. Everything they have to do is about basically controlling us. And I love that they have this, but they don't really, you can tell an Eldar life is not really about enjoyment. It's sort of about control. I want to read a little bit about the Path of the Warrior, but then I want to read about the Exarchs because it's the Exarch War which really made me fall in love. So I'll read the Path of the Warrior. It says, so the Path of the Warrior is basically, the Path of the Warrior calls most Eldar sometime along their lives. Both male and female both take part in this path. The warriors are likely, just as likely to be female than male. Unlike most other Eldar paths, that of the warrior is divided in separate ways. Each warrior is a warrior aspect, which represents a different facet of the Eldar god, Kael Min Shekain. Every aspect differs in methods of warfare, specialized skills. Exactly what draws an Eldar to a path is sort of uncertain. The key thing, though, is that perhaps it is the recognition of the innate destructive impulse which only ritual training can purge. So they go on the path of the warrior because these guys have, and think about this, if humans have a destructive impulse and Eldar are heightened, how much more destructive is their impulse that they have to sort of purge through these warrior paths? I will get into, you can read about it. Basically, it talks about how aspect warriors, they don't live at their shrines. They basically, after they put aside their ritual masks and uniforms, they can walk at peace through the craft world. Only the keepers of the shrine live within, the Exarchs. And I want to talk about Exarchs because one of the things we remember something that these paths aren't meant to be. The whole point of all these different paths is that you're supposed to go down a path and then go like separate from the path and start another path, right? And but what happens when you get so engrossed in your path? That's when you become an Exarch. When basically you become fixated, and what they actually call it is you become lost on the path. You basically you can't travel any other path anymore. And the Eldar actually consider Exarchs to be basically a terrible fate. They don't view Exarchs as a good thing. They view it as like a pretty scary thing because they say that you're lost on. You basically can't be brought back into society. You're forever lost. And so much so that I want to read the Exarchs. It says, to all Exar paths are strewn with dangers. For the Eldar mind, it is capable of a depth and understanding which goes beyond the concepts of mere human obsession. Such dangers are likened to traps or nets, waiting to catch an unwary Eldar path and hold him fast forever. When an Eldar's mind becomes so tightly focused upon one thing, he can no longer make the change to another path when he is said to be lost on the path. This is a terrible and frightening thing for all Eldar. It is the fate which can befall all of them despite the discipline and training. It's actually a failure for a person to become an Exarch. It's actually a failure to become. It means that they've basically just been lost. So much so, this is so cool. An Exarch soul is so twisted, they actually, when they die, they can't be inserted into the infinity circuit because their soul won't basically be able to basically go to their version of heaven. So what do they do? When an aspect warrior becomes an Exarch, he adopts the armored suit of his shrine. Each shrine preserves the suits of its dead Exarchs, often the very suits of the shrine's founders. These suits are usually extremely elaborate and ancient. Once put on, the suit is never removed and becomes a permanent part of the Eldar, its psychoplastic form meshing with the tissues. If slain, the warrior's costume will be found to be empty, his body having long since been consumed within the suit itself. Exarch suits are studded with spirit stones of all the Eldar who have ever worn the suit. Their spirits continue to circulate through the psychosupportive environment of the suit, like a miniature version of the infinity circuit. Like, that just blew my mind, that Exarchs can't be put in the infinity circuit, but literally their suits that they wear basically becomes a miniature infinity circuit for all the other Exarchs of that suit. I thought that was so freaking cool. Anyway, I'm done, but I'll let you can get, if y'all want to comment on it. I just think it's awesome. So
that's kind of one of the reasons why I think the Eldar at this juncture are peak grimdark. Even when you try and help your innate nature by focusing on something. If you focus on that too much, then you'll basically become trapped inside a suit and consumed by it. Like, that's amazing. That's amazing writing. I love it.
It is, and it's another just hallmark of Pete Grimdark. That there's this point of no return, and that once you've gone down these paths, too far, you're just lost. You're completely gone, and you see, this is a great instance of that, right? They and their whole society has basically just given up on them. I mean, because they've gone too far, and that's another just a great aspect of Grimdark and great thing that GW has always done really well. And a lot of their stuff in Warhammer, the Warhammer universe, that was kind of magic, could be like was a lot of powerful, but you're innately tapping into these really unstable forces. And anyone who played Warhammer Fantasy Battles, you roll a miscast, and you just might open up a portal and summon a demon, because that's how the universe is there. It's you want to tap into these things, but it's also if you go too far, you risk just oblivion and destruction.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's to this day, I'll always love Exarchs and love that. So thank you, reader, listeners, for hearing me nerd out. Let's hear Bozz. It's Bozz's turn to nerd out.
Thank you very much. So just to end on the Eldar note, so just as an indication of how big an Eldar fanboy I was, when I was 13 or 14 and had my my first Hotmail account, Keela meant chicane was actually my password.
That's awesome.
That's how into the Eldar lore at that period of time I was.
Yeah.
So we're going to go from talking about these graceful kind of superhuman alien type things to just the plain old vanilla humans. My absolute favorite lore in the 40k universe, and in pretty much any sci-fi setting you'd care to mention, is just your normal, average, everyday humans who have been conscripted, or in rare cases volunteered, into this gigantic, slow-moving, all-encompassing human army that will just crush you with numbers eventually. And just the everyday people like you and I who are just pitted into battle against monsters and aliens and, supernaturally fast aliens wearing suits that may or may not have consumed them, and they're now their own infinity circuit. Like, there's something about that really speaks to me at quite a deep level, this idea of your everyman, your every person being thrown into battle against these monsters and expected to die, but ultimately expected to win. And that's kind of the premise of the Imperial Guard, is more bodies. More bodies, more bodies, more bodies. We will crush them by sheer weight of numbers. It doesn't matter if we lose 10,000, 10 million, whatever. We will win. We will take the objective. We will secure the world. We will, get the MacGuffin, whatever the case may be. We will do it because we are humans and we breed like rabbits. The best resource in the Imperium, the cheapest resource in the Imperium is the Imperium itself, made up of people. So I guess to zero in on that further, there are things that I like about it specifically that are very, very grimdark. I love the Dan Abnett series about Colonel Commissar Gaunt and Gaunt's ghosts. I got about 7 or 8 books into that series, and it was just beautifully written, grimdark war fiction. And horrible things happen, and it's suspenseful, and it's really well told, and the characters are interesting, and they develop over time, and they are at the very core of themselves just folk. Like there's criminals who somehow find themselves in positions of power so they can steal more. There's the funny guy, there's the young guy, there's the dumb guy, there's the person in charge. You can pick that up and drop it down into like a corporate setting, or a high school musical, or whatever. Like, these are just people. And it's really beautifully written, and it gets you when they die. One of the reasons I stopped reading it is because my favorite character was kind of unceremoniously killed off, and I was like, well, damn.
Well, it's another just great thing about Grimdark is you get to these, especially in the sci-fi versions, the societies that have progressed to this level where life is just cheap, where you know it's essentially just the whole society is essentially just this giant machine, and people just are kind of fuel for the machine, and there's no, it kind of absorbs your sense of self into this massive enterprise. And you know it's a fascinating thing because you can go down to the small level and see the people and like their individualities and their personalities, and but ultimately it's all just consumed in the in the grim dark of the far future.
Yeah.
There's only war, right? I mean, that's the whole thing, is that there's no real heroes in the kind of classical sense. It's just more fuel for the fire, and uh it's really can be quite fun to watch, and you can see how it kind of like grimdark fiction is not for everybody, right? It's not, but it does kind of, it speaks to a certain aspect, part of the human experience when you just kind of feel helpless, and just that nothing you do really matters, and it's all kind of part of this ongoing process that you have no real control over. And it could be fun to read about that and indulge in that a little bit.
Yeah, humanity is written so well. And I think obviously it's like one of the things that sticks out to me is that like you really do feel that you're right. There's this personal feeling that you see the characters of these things, and like they care, they feel, and they are heroic. These individuals are truly, humans are heroic, but they are sort of juxtaposed against this imperial machine. Like, I think it was the 5th edition war or 40K Codex where they talk about the Imperium being just this. They were like, at one point they were like, oh, basically there was people were sending in their tithes, and there was a slight mistake where it didn't count some planet's tithes, and they thought it was rebellion, and they just sent people and destroyed the planet, all because of basically some cleric messed up. When I read that, I was like, wow, that is so grimdark. To basically some planet gets destroyed because some mindless cleric or clerical error. But you juxtapose that against, just like Bozz is saying, the heroics of these men and women who fight far above their pay, above their punch way above what they're supposed to, just through numbers. And each one of those people are portrayed as actually a hero. I think is so good. Yeah, I love that.
And at the other end of the spectrum, and to kind of follow on from what Sam was saying, my absolute favorite lore concerning the Imperial Guard is actually the Caiaphas Cain series by Sandy Mitchell. And they take grimdark in a really different direction, and it's comedy. So Caiaphas Cain is a commissar. He's a hero of the Imperium, and he's an absolute coward. So, the kind of premise is that this Inquisitor has found Cain's private memoirs after his death, and they go into how he actually felt and what actually happened. And he's like, well, actually, all those times where I looked heroic, I was kind of just trying to save my own skin, and I keep on getting into scrape after scrape after scrape and coming out looking absolutely golden. And it's so refreshing to see funny grimdark, because it is still grimdark. There is still some messed up stuff that happens, but it's injected with this feeling of intense humanity. Commissars are supposed to be these, they're taken into the Schola Progenium when they're orphaned, basically. When their parents, who are officers in the Imperial Guard, die in the line of duty, the orphans are taken to the Schola Progenium, and they're funneled into becoming either commissars or stormtroopers or sisters of battle, I think, if they're girls. Don't quote me on that, but still, they're supposed to be turned out as these, fanatically loyal, fanatically pious, emperor botherers who are, bottom line, rules are rules. If you break one rule, I'm going to shoot you. And Cain is such a human. He's a multifaceted, flawed human who got out of that system going, right, I just want to find a quiet regiment. He started off in an artillery regiment. I just want to find a quiet regiment and serve out my life in service to the Emperor, far away from the front lines, and just be nice and comfortable. And, through that mentality of, right, I'm going to take the path of least resistance, keeps getting himself into these stupid situations and keeps on prevailing. And kind of, as the Inquisitor says, who kind of prefaces the stories and kind of adds notes as the story unfolds as well, it's really entertaining. She says, even with his flaws, and maybe because of his flaws, he was actually one of the most successful servants of the Emperor ever. And it's just, I love that it's turned on its head.
I've been wanting to read that book. I've been wanting to read that, actually. I've heard good things about it.
Do it. You will not regret it. Go on, Sam.
I can't remember what I was going to say. No, don't worry about it. But yeah, it's you got to love the humanity of Grimdark too, because it is like they do accomplish these great things, and you're always kind of left wondering too, is this some kind of grand master plan, or do things just kind of get thrown together? And you're never quite sure as the reader, kind of the outside perspective, is like, is anybody actually really coordinating this, or does it just kind of things kind of get thrown at the wall, and sometimes they work? And it's part of the fun of it too, is that you're left kind of not really sure. Is the Emperor ever going to really come back and save everybody, or are we just kind of feeding into this thing that's never going to actually be what we want it to be, and maybe never was?
Yeah, I think that's what makes Grimdark so good, and GW writing it. I haven't read recent stuff, but it's this idea that there is no plot armor in this universe, not even close. It's like, nope, any of your hero is on the chopping block easily. Just like Bozz was saying earlier.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Sam, so what about you, Sam? Let's get some nerding out from you.
So I'm going to depart from the sci-fi here and go more to fantasy, because I've always been more into fantasy. Dan is dragging me kicking and screaming into building a sci-fi army for OPR, but that'll still take some time. I fell in love with the Warhammer lore. In the 5th edition High Elves was kind of my start, and I and then even going as I went more and more into the lore, I loved the fact that you had the High Elves were in some ways also a juxtaposition against the kind of the Grimdark universe, where things are pretty terrible in the Warhammer universe, whether that's the 40k universe or the Warhammer fantasy, and the High Elves are just like desperately trying to kind of hold on to this image of their past glory, and kind of really failing to it. And the best one comes from the War of the Beard. And if you're not familiar with the War of the Beard, it is so in the ancient days of the Warhammer fantasy, the Warhammer world, the elves and the dwarves both had kind of massive empires that spanned most of the world. They forge a kind of a treaty of friendship, which goes south when a dwarf emissary in the court of the Phoenix King over some kind of it was a dark elf raid that actually started this, and the dwarves at the time did not realize it was not a high elf action, but it was a dark elf action. So they go before in the court of the Phoenix King, and this dwarf has the audacity, of course, to draw his weapon, and rather than kill him, of course, the high elves decide to cut off his beard and send him back. This, of course, he was, of course, the like nephew or cousin of the king. I can't remember exactly. This starts a centuries-long war, which basically ends with the dwarves sacking the high elf capital and killing the Phoenix King and taking the crown, which they still own to this like even far later, and it basically ruins both empires. And obviously the elves and the dwarves have very different accounts of how this all goes down, but it was one of always the fascinating things where that in the high elf perspective, it was it was a mercy that they didn't just kill them. They by right they should have killed this dwarf emissary, and of course the dwarf perspective, cutting off someone's beard is worse than death. That is the ultimate shame you can have, and it's a fascinating story to me because they actually did a whole at various points, they did a whole campaign. You could have special rules to represent the elf and dwarf armies of that era. But it's another kind of fascinating thing that you see the pride of both of the races just ultimately bring them to ruin, because neither of them ever recovered their strength after that. The dwarves won the war in one sense, but it was also like nobody really won the war. It wiped out both of their empires.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a dwarf player too, I certainly am going to defend the dwarfs into this. I mean, no, I love Warhammer lore, and I especially love the dwarf lore. Yeah, it's so great too. It's great. Yeah.
What I love about GW lore, whether it's fantasy or sci-fi, is that it's satire. It's just close enough to real life for us to go, huh, I wonder if there could be a historical parallel drawn between the War of the Beard and something that might have actually happened. What can we learn from this? It's a very clever way to have a dig at ourselves, and I appreciate that.
And satire is so important too, and you really do have to be able to look at your own history with a sense of the people in the past were no more omniscient than we are today. In fact, and they had flaws that led them to people to make mistakes, even people of power, even people that are revered, in history. And it's an important thing to kind of always be mindful of that. I don't know. I mean, I love history, and that's kind of where I've my love of Warhammer and wargaming and wargaming lore has always stemmed from that love of history. And I just want to, and it's GW does a really good job generally of that.
Of that time, I mean, I think it changed. I don't know about you. I'll speak for myself. It affected how I grew as a person. Leaving those teenage years, reading that sort of lore, you come away in your teenage years very cynical and just a lot more. And it's a good and bad thing where you read this harsh reality, and you sort of just. I don't know. It's sort of just almost sort of kind of makes you a little more mentally tough, I suppose, that you're just willing to take, just saying, yeah, this is the world. And that writing of that time was unabashed. It was no punches pulled. This is the world.
Yeah. And it's because I went from kind of reading, the Games Workshop stuff to, I think one of my favorite authors of especially as a teenager was Glenn Cook and the Black Company series. Great grim dark fantasy series. No heroes, if we're talking about a mercenary company. And it really was kind of a way that it shaped me. I mean, even as a teenager, I was going down every Wednesday night, I think it was then, to Thor's Hammer, which doesn't even exist anymore. And playing Warhammer Fantasy, and I that was kind of my tribe. I didn't have a lot of friends in school, but I had that. So for that Games Workshop, I will say thank you. It is a huge part of my childhood. Still pissed about what you did to it, but I can at least have my memories.
It never happened. The end times never happened.
Yeah. Now they're going back on that. Now I'm going to bring back the old world. We'll see.
Bozz, what are some sort of last thoughts on your thought? What do you think?
Well, I have to give kudos because it all comes under this GW umbrella. Obviously, these outside authors get paid for their work and they get contracted to do it, and it's signed off by GW corporate, whatever. I've got no respect for GW corporate, and I never will, because they're a bunch of well, you can infer from context what I'm talking about. But their writers have, as you've said, Dan, they've played a large part in shaping a lot of my worldviews and kind of moving out of that cynicism of one's late teens and early 20s and realizing the value of satire and realizing the value of understanding and engaging with a world where there are no clear-cut good guys and bad guys. Everyone's grey with leaning towards the bad, with a tiny little spark of good in them just to keep it interesting. And I got to thank GW for providing that, because it was my entry into wargaming, and wargaming is a large part of my identity. It's certainly not all of it, but it's a large part, and it played a large role in those formative years of mine.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I agree. Well, we'll close this one off on a good note, and I'll say too, thank you, GW, for writing. You're right, just that writing that has impacted all of our lives. So, what do you know? We're thanking GW.
Don't get
All right.
don't get used to it.
Yeah, we will be back.
This is a sign of the end times.
Yes. Don't worry. We will fulfill Sam's desire. We will have another GW episode where we express some less thankful feelings. But for now, Bozz, last words?
Well, I don't want to steal Sam's line because it's too good. But I'm looking forward to playing more games and reading more of this lore and seeing my stories unfold on the tabletop.
There you go. Sam.
I am been seeing some of the spoilers and such for the old world, and at least the models look cool. I wonder if they're gonna bring back some of that great writing and the stuff that really captured my attention. But we will have to wait and see, and likely be disappointed, because as we said, the world is kind of a grim, dark world in some ways, even the real world, and you got the corporate overlords who just kind of really don't care too much about you and I, and they just want our money. So, well, we'll see if that how that plays out.
Maybe the writers were secretly talking, secretly dogging on the owners of GW with the lore. I wonder if that actually happened. Well, for another time, thanks everyone.
Any war game, anytime. Going where the game is good.